So hello gamers, this is Raiz Rathpith QT, a Armageddon Brand Rathpith globe character. It's entirely reliant on this item. It's an item that's been changed not too long ago, and many people don't know what it's been changed to. And I think overall it's very underrated. Basically, the main concept of the build is we get a lot of HP and we go boom boom bam bam. It is my league starter, pretty much, for Crucible, but the shield itself is pretty rare. On softcore, you can definitely get it. On hardcore, there's only been 2, and I had to pay way too much money for this one to get it, but it got my build functional, so we're playing with it. But the concept of the build is, as you can read, it gives you some increased maximum life, it gives you some block, which is nice because we use glancing blows, which allows me to cap out block with Tempest Shield. But then sacrifice 10% of your life when you use or trigger a spell skill. So whenever we use any ability, it sacrifices that 10% life, which is the downside of the build because it doesn't actually give you any benefit. But the other affixes are 5% increased critical strike chance for spells per 100 player maximum life, and 5% increased spell damage per 100 player maximum life. And this is independent of the sacrifice. So you don't have to sacrifice to be able to gain this bonus. It's just passively always there. And that's the main premise of the character. Basically, you get a lot of HP. So let's assume that I have 1000 HP. It gives me 50 crit chance, and it gives me 50 spell damage. What this allows me to do is get a boatload of defenses by just having a lot of HP. We're playing a Inquisitor, obviously, because we want to rely on regeneration and sustain to be able to continue to heal up through the sacrifice. And then you get Righteous Providence, you get Inevitable Judgment, you get, again, a ton of increased critical strike chance as you continue to scale your HP. And it just all works in tandem incredibly well. I played it last league and it was super good, but there have been many changes to the build so far. And so I went from playing a mana build to now hoping to eventually play it as a blood magic character. And Dan made a POB for it, and I'm not quite sure if I love it just yet, because I do think there's, and I never thought that I'm gonna say this, there are a couple flaws, and that's primarily the regeneration. The regeneration is super important because eventually this build goes low life, and eventually this build uses petrified blood. So that's another reason why you need that regeneration. With the character that I played last league, it was pretty much the main thing about the build that I don't quite have access to yet. I think to really go low life for this character, I'm gonna have to get a Glorious Vanity to get that Doriani effect, to get that Corrupted Soul, which is 50% of non-chaos damage taken, bypasses energy shield, and gain 15% of maximum life as an extra energy shield, which, yeah, protects us a lot. It helps me with the sustain for the RF because it splits it up. And then with the use of Sanctuary and with the use of Pious Path, it just gives us a boatload of regeneration. So we essentially end up double dipping that when it comes to defenses. I don't quite know if I'm going to end up with the blood magic build or if I'm going to end up with a mana stacking build, or not a mana stacking build, but a build that uses a lot of curses, a lot of auras, and a lot of aura effect, because you get to utilize things such as Vol Smite, which scales with aura effect, and it's super duper powerful in a character such as this one, because we're playing an Inquisitor, and through Inevitable Judgment, that means that we can pretty much scale with any increase to our spell damage. So it doesn't have to be fire damage or lightning damage specifically. We can get anything, so any increases are good. So things like the Ritual Helmet is going to be really powerful. Things like the Implicit on this ring is going to be really powerful. And yeah, in that sense, it's just a super straightforward character, and it doesn't suffer while mapping from all of the issues of, you know, having to deal with high resistance mobs, especially with Crucible. Some of the mobs seem to have incredibly large amounts of resistances. Yeah, we pretty much cap out our crit, because even though my crit here shows that I have 52% chance, I'm not using a crit strikes gem. And if I were to put down my Frost Shield, that gives me a bunch of crit. And if I were to use my Assassin's Mark, it gives me power charges and it gives me flat crit. So we actually already have capped out crit and we're able to scale just crit multiplier. And yeah, that's pretty much the primary idea of the build. Get a lot of HP. As for the gearing itself, again, this is League start. So my character's only level 90. I don't have a whole lot of gear. I invested all of my well-earned currency into flasks because I'm a lazy fuck and I just wanted them to be as automated as possible. But the gear is really straightforward. A good example of the gear that I really want in the future would be something like this, which is a lot of life. Obviously, these boots will have movement speed. You want to be capping out your chaos resistance. Unfortunately, I'm not quite able to do that just yet. I am running around with minus 14, which is an optimal. And you want increased life recovery rate. Either life recovery rate or just regeneration is very powerful too. Maybe you want to use Immortal Flesh as your belt. You can also get regeneration on your belt, just a flat amount of regeneration, not a percentage. On your gloves, you want to be getting a percentage regen and pretty much the same stats, except you can't get the movement speed, of course. And a good example of that gear, and the reason why I'm using this POB as an example, is because Dan is an incredibly brilliant guy, and so he put it all together for us. Again, this is only really applicable for the blood magic build, but you've got some examples of really nicely done gear, and it's things such as these gloves, for instance, where you've just got a lot of life, a lot of life regeneration rate. These items aren't hard to roll, they're not hard to acquire. Most builds are very cheap because of this, because yeah, people just don't use life regeneration rate. But this build, it's everything for it. And then the implicits on gear are very important too. Currently on my character, because of how early in the game it is, I am using determination, but I don't really want to be sticking with armor in the long term. What you really want, and what I really want, is things such as this one. So in the implicit, you've got 8% of physical damage from hits taken as fire damage. He's obviously planning to use as Taste of Hate. He's got this 15% of physical damage from hits taken as lightning damage. You can use a Gravicious Craft early on for something like this, and just continue to stack those conversions, and it ends up being a substantial amount of physical defense. And then when it comes to elemental damage, essentially in the very end game, because of the way that Petrified Blood works, as long as you've got enough regeneration, you can even be at 0 HP and you're still not going to be dying because that damage will be applied over time. So as long as you don't take an elemental hit, in my case right now, for, you know, if I were to be using Petrified Blood for almost 10,000 damage, I shouldn't be dying. And this build also scales really well with like the new masteries, which has been a significant buff to it. You can get things like you count as on low life while at 55 maximum life or below, and this actually changes the amount of HP that you're going to be getting with Petrified Blood. So I'm really looking forward to that, because perked up with the Pain Attunement is just going to be a ton of defense and a ton of damage. And yeah, it also gets to use cool things. I mean, I think pretty much every hardcore character's masteries should look like this, where you've got a bunch of these masteries that don't do anything for you, such as you count as on full life while at 90% of maximum life or below. This doesn't do anything for me. Once I'm blood magic, the skills cost life instead of mana also doesn't do anything for me. But the reason why we're picking up all of these is because we can then take 10% more maximum life if you have at least 6 life masteries allocated, which it's more maximum life, it's a multiplier. Maybe that's something that some of you guys can utilize in all sorts of other builds that you enjoy. But yeah, pretty interesting concept. Again, I played it last league and it was a ton of fun. I'm wanting to see how far I can push the blood magic version. And as far as league starters go, as long as you've got the access to the shield, it's been scaling really well, especially on hardcore. So my gear is definitely nothing special, and there's definitely much to improve in the future, but it's already working pretty well. As for the leveling, I guess, for anybody who's interested, I leveled with a classic Ignite build initially, which is just Ignite Proliferation and Magma Orb. and then you're using Fireball. At level 12, I started using Wintertide. And then I actually converted to Righteous Fire. There's plenty of guides about Righteous Fire, so I'm not really going to get into it all that much right now. But the TLDR is you get out of Templar as soon as possible, scaling through the damage nodes. So you get the damage nodes, you can take Holy Dominion, and you can go all the way down to Arsonist, which allows you to pick up a very important mastery, which is regenerate 1% life per second for each 1% uncapped fire resistance. And so uncapped fire resistance is essentially anything below 0 on your character. So you can have 75, and that's going to give you 75 flat regeneration, which is a boatload, you know, in Act 2 of the game. Or you can get as much as you could possibly get, and that also continues to give you that regeneration. Then you go to Hardy. Hardy is very good because it's regeneration rate, so essentially a multiplier for your regeneration, and you can pick up the second really important node, which is regenerate 50 life per second. With these two nodes, in Act 2, I was regenerating like 50% of my life per second, so immediately you were able to use Righteous Fire, and that's what I used to get to maps until, what I kept using until I was able to buy the Rathpith. I paired it up with some Armageddon Brand, some Wintertide. Honestly, it's up to you. You can totally use Armageddon Brand, because do keep in mind that the reason why we would be using Righteous Fire in this build at its core, even past the point of using it for killing mobs, would be because it grants you the 39% more spell damage, and because we have this boatload of regeneration, this multiplier is actually super duper useful. And yeah, I think that's pretty much it. Again, the character's going well. Hope this is useful for some of you guys. Rathpith seems like a complicated concept at first, and many people don't understand the reason why I'm scaling so much HP. But once you actually look at the shield, it's pretty self-explanatory. So hope to see you guys in the next one, and hopefully my character is going to be looking even better for that. Like and subscribe. Chat is telling me to tell you to like and subscribe, so I will. I just did. Good luck, gamers.